Welcome to Mishna study Masechet Maasrot. We're going to jump right into it. There's not much of an introduction. Maasrot is much shorter Masechet than Masechet Terumot. But here we're going to focus on the Maaser Rishon, right? Maaser Rishon is the first tithe, the first 10% that you give to the Levi. So after you separate 2% and you gave that Terumah to the Kohen, the next in line that you need to give, and hence Rambam actually explains that this is the reason why it follows, if you remember from the introduction to the Mishnah, right? It's because this is the next thing that you give. You give 10% to the Levi. So from the 98 that's left, right, you gave 2% to the Kohen, so you have 98. So now you're going to 9.8, right, to the Levi, if you bring, being exact. And right, that's exactly 10%. And this goes to the Levi, like we said. Now we're going to discuss when is a person obligated to give Maaser, right? At what stage of the fruit's growth is it obligated? Are you obligated to give Maaser? What is obligated to give Maaser on, right? If you have, you obviously don't have to give Maaser on cattle and eggs, right? Things that grow from the ground. Let's say something like mushrooms, right? Is that obligated or Maaser, right? There are a lot of laws that come to this, and we're going to have to discuss it. Similarly, at what point, right? So we say at what point you have to give Maaser, and also at what stage during the process, right? Is it when you pick it? Is it when you grind it up? When you thresh it? When you bundle it? At what point does the obligation of Maaser take effect? And that's going to be the discussion of a lot of this perek. We're going to go through many different fruits and explain each one individually. So first of all, what is obligated in Maaser? And then we're going to jump into when. So the first thing is klal. Klal amru b'Maasrot. Right? There's an important rule that said b'Maasrot. If you remember, we had the same language by Masechet Pe'ah, and it's important to point out the differences. When we learned it back then, I said, remember this Mishnah because it comes up in different form. Over here, we're going to understand the klal amru b'Maasrot. The rule that when it comes to Maaser, what is it? Kol shu ochel v'nishmar v'gidulav min haaretz hayav b'Maasrot. 3 criteria. Right? Pe'ah had 5 criteria. These are 3. It needs to be food, right? It can't be any dyes. V'nishmar means to be something that's protected, so it's not hefker. It's not just ownerless, right? It's something that belongs to someone. V'gidulav min haaretz, it grows from the ground. Right? This comes to exclude mushrooms, right, and different types of fungi. If it's those 3 criteria, hayav b'Maasrot. Right, so a cucumber would be hayav maaser. From the fruits, apples would be hayav maaser. Right, all these are obligated maaser. Remember Masechet Pe'ah, in order for it to be hayav in Pe'ah, we had 2 other conditions. Right, we had to be mechaneso lekiyum u'lekitato ke'ahat. Right, you need to actually, store it, and we said you also have to gather them, pick them all, harvest them together. Right, over here, that's not a criteria for Maasrot. It's just these 3. Food needs to be, protected, non-hefker, and it needs to grow from the ground. Now, where do we learn this from? So it's an asmachta, right? There's a hint to it in the pasuk, and it's from aser te'aser et kol tivuat zarecha hayotze hasadeh shana shana. Right, so hayotze hasadeh, right? It's something that's comes from the ground, it grows from the ground, right? That's what the Gidulav min haaretz. And the next pasuk is ve'achalta lifnei Adonai Elohecha ma'asad diganecha tiroshecha v'tzerecha. Needs to be something edible, right? So it needs to be food, right? As opposed to different dyes. And then we know that it can't be efker. It needs to be something that's nishmar, and that learns from the word zar'echa, right? Your zera, right? That's something that you're saving. Right, it's not something that's mufkar, hefker for everyone else. So that's the first rule when it comes to Maasrot. Ve'od klal ha'chil amru, kol shetehilato ochel ve'sofo ochel, af al pi shu shomro le'osif ochel, hayav katan v'gadol. Right, so anything that starts off as food and it ends off as food, right? Even though it's constantly growing, right? So take a gourd, take a pumpkin, for example. It starts off, it's edible in its small state, right? And it grows, and even in its larger state, it's also edible, right? But the entire process, the entire growth period, it's also edible. Hayav katan v'gadol. You're obligated to give maaser, whether whether it's small or whether it's big, right? Whenever you pick it, that's when you're going to be hayav to give maaser. right? For these, I'm going to point out that these are mostly vegetables, right? Vegetables fall into this category: a cucumber, a carrot, right? All these things are edible small, and as they grow and they finish in their larger form, they're also edible big. So whenever you're going to separate maaser, they can be obligated big, they can be obligated small, whatever it is. But something that in its original form, in its smaller stage, it's not food, right? Take grapes, take an apple, right? These things are unedible in its earlier stages of growth. But as it grows, it turns into something edible. It's only obligated in Maasrot at the end, right? Once it turns into a food, and this is the fruits, for example. So the first half was talking about vegetables. The latter is talking about, right, something that that's unedible in the beginning but turns into something edible. That's considered fruits. They learned this from the pasuk mizer haaretz miperi haetz, right? So until it's a peri, right? And similarly, right? It needs to be, an actual grain, right? You're not separating it until it's an actual grain, right? So, it comes to fruits, it comes to grains that, you can only give when it's in its bigger form, and therefore it's only going to be obligated in Maasrot once it's bigger.